I'm about to tell you 3 mysterious stories, and at the end, it's up to you to guess which one is real and which one isn't. You'll need a sharp mind to get all 3 right. At the end of the video, I'll reveal the truth, so stick around. Let's jump into the first story. Have you ever been walking somewhere and suddenly thought you saw someone out of the corner of your eye, but when you looked again, there was no one there? You tell yourself it was just your imagination, but what if it wasn't? What if someone was really there, but disappeared before you could notice? Our first story is about a young couple who got on a train, only to experience something they'd never forget. This one's called The Train to Nowhere. Brandon and his wife Amber were finally going out after a long time. They were headed to a party and were excited to have a fun night. That evening, they took the train to Melrose. As soon as they got on, they noticed something strange. It was completely empty. But they didn't think much of it. As the train started moving, they chatted about how great the night was going to be. A few minutes in, Brandon noticed a man at the other end of the train. He was wearing a black suit, holding a briefcase, and looked very well put together. Brandon and Amber were actually kind of relieved. At least they weren't alone in the train. They looked away for just a second, and when they looked back, the man was gone. Vanished. In less than 2 seconds. Weird, but not that weird, right? But then just a few minutes later, Brandon looked up, and the same man was standing right over him, staring down at him with a serious expression. That's when things started to feel wrong. Brandon and Amber, a little freaked out, asked him where this train was headed. The man simply said, "This train is going nowhere." That was the moment they felt real fear. And then, just like before, the man disappeared. Suddenly, the train started speeding up. The lights inside flickered. The whole train shook like something was seriously wrong. Then, out of nowhere, it pulled into a station they didn't recognize. Brandon and Amber got off immediately. They were so shaken they decided to skip the party and just go home. But when they got home, they noticed something strange. There was a strong smell of gas coming from one of their neighbors' houses. Worried, they rushed over and found out that gas was leaking inside. The woman living there, an elderly lady, was unconscious. They broke the door down, shut off the gas, and pulled her outside just in time. As Amber was leaving the house, something caught her eye. A framed photo. She picked it up and brought it to the woman. Amber asked, "Who's in this picture?" The old woman looked at it and said, "That's me and my husband, but he passed away 29 years ago." Now, here's where things get really weird. The man in the photo, the one who had died 29 years ago, looked exactly like the strange man on the train. Same face, same body, even wearing the same black suit. So, what do you think? Could this story be real? If it is, how is it possible that a man who's been dead for 29 years could suddenly appear on a train? Maybe he never really died. Maybe he just ran away and wanted to disappear from his old life. Or maybe we're just messing with your head. Stick around until the end of the video, and we'll tell you if this story is real or fake. All right, time for the second story. We've all had those moments when we leave the house and suddenly wonder, did I turn the stove off? Or did I leave the lights on? Sometimes little forgetful mistakes like that don't mean much. But in the wrong place at the wrong time, they can have serious consequences. This next story is called The Icy Man, and it's about a guy who made a mistake he would never come back from. In 2009, in Texas, a 51-year-old man named Mitchell Richardson decided to go on a little shopping trip, but not the regular kind. He wasn't planning on paying for anything. Mitchell was a thief, and this wasn't his first time stealing. When he got inside the store, he skillfully stuffed items into his bag, acting like he knew exactly what he was doing. And at first, it seemed like everything was going fine. He was sure he'd get out without a problem. But then, the alarm went off. Mitchell knew that alarm was for him. Someone must have caught on. Panicked, he realized he couldn't go out the front entrance. His only option was to run toward the storage area and parking garage beneath the store. Down there, he saw several delivery trucks, all loaded with goods for the store. With nowhere else to go, he made a split-second decision. He climbed into the back of one of the trucks and shut the door behind him. At first, it wasn't so bad. It was cold, sure, but nothing he couldn't handle. The truck was carrying frozen meat, so the storage compartment was refrigerated, but Mitchell figured he'd be in and out before it got too bad. Meanwhile, the store employees searched the area, but they couldn't find him. His plan was simple: wait for the truck to leave the store then hop out at the first stop and make his escape. Hours later, the driver finally got in and started the truck. Mitchell felt it moving, which meant it was time to get ready. But then, the temperature inside started dropping. It got so cold that it became unbearable. Panicking, Mitchell tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked from the outside. That's when the fear really set in. He started banging on the walls, screaming, hoping someone would hear him. But the driver, sitting up front, had no idea there was a man freezing to death in the back of his truck. Minutes passed. Then silence. By the time the truck reached its destination, it was too late. The driver opened the compartment to unload the frozen meat, and instead, he found a frozen body. Shocked, he immediately called the police. It didn't take long for them to piece things together. The frozen man in the truck was the same guy who had just tried to rob the store. So, what do you think? Did Mitchell really not consider that shutting himself inside a frozen meat truck might be a bad idea? Did he really not realize that the temperature would drop even lower once the truck started moving? Or maybe this whole thing never happened at all. Maybe we're just messing with you. Stick around until the end of the video, and we'll reveal whether this story was real or fake. Now, let's move on to our third and final story. This one's about magic. Do you believe in magic? Most adults don't, but kids love magic. This time, we're talking about a pair of 11-year-old twins who wanted to try magic for themselves in a place they never should have. This story is called The Enchanted Forest. In 2019, in the UK, 11-year-old twins named Amelia and Albert were obsessed with magic. They had read every fantasy book they could find, and one day, Amelia came up with a wild idea. What if they could meet God by performing a ritual in a special forest? The forest they chose was none other than Sherwood Forest, a legendary woodland in eastern England. Early in the morning, they set off without telling anyone where they were going. They only brought a few notes, a couple of books about magic, and a single phone. Since their house was close to the forest, the walk wasn't difficult. Once they arrived, Amelia, who had planned the whole thing, turned to Albert and said, "All right, here's what we do. We'll follow the steps from the storybook. You go right, and I'll go left. When we reach the special spot, we sit down and recite the magic words. That's how we summon God. But make sure you sit between two big trees." Albert nodded, and without hesitation, they each went their separate ways. At first, they were probably excited, like they were real-life characters in one of their books. But as the sun began to set, the magic of the moment faded. The once inviting forest turned dark and eerie. And then, thunder rolled in. A heavy storm had begun. Alone in the deep woods, Amelia felt the weight of their little adventure sinking in. Every shadow seemed to move. Every rustle in the leaves felt like something creeping toward her. Fear took over. She ran. Rain poured down as she sprinted blindly through the forest, sobbing until she finally reached a main road. Luckily, Amelia was the one carrying the phone. With shaking hands, she called her parents, crying as she told them everything. But then they asked her one question that made her stomach drop. "Where's Albert?" she admitted. "I don't know. He went right, I went left. I have the phone, he has nothing." Her parents immediately called the police and rushed to Amelia's location. Now, there was one problem. Albert was absolutely terrified of the dark. A massive search began that night. Officers, volunteers, search dogs, and even drones scoured Sherwood Forest, but there was no trace of Albert. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Albert never came home. Some believe he didn't survive the harsh weather. Others think he was kidnapped. And then there are those who believe something else happened. What if Albert really did find that special place? What if he did go somewhere beyond our understanding? Or maybe, just maybe, none of this ever happened. Maybe we made up this entire story just to trick you. That brings us to the end of this episode. Now, it's time to reveal which stories were real and which ones were pure fiction. But before that, let's do a quick recap. Story number 1, The Train to Nowhere. A couple encounters a strange man on a train. Later, they find his exact photograph in their neighbor's home, only to learn that he had been dead for 29 years. Story number 2, The Icy Man. A 51-year-old man, caught stealing, hides inside a frozen meat truck to escape, only for his frozen body to be discovered hours later. Story number 3, The Enchanted Forest. Two twin siblings venture into the woods, hoping to meet God. One of them makes it out. The other is never seen again. Now you have 10 seconds to make your final guesses. Remember, maybe all of these stories were real. Maybe none of them were. Or maybe it was a mix of both. Also, keep in mind that while the stories may be real, we have changed the names of the people involved for privacy reasons. Alright, here's the truth. What do you think about the first story, The Train to Nowhere? Do you think this story was made up? Well, you're wrong. It was real. What about the second story, The Iceman? If your guess is that this story was real, then you were right. Now, let's move on to the final story. Do you think the Enchanted Forest was real? Well, we tricked you. This story wasn't real at all. It was completely made up. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another mystery. And here's something fun. If you've ever experienced something truly strange in your life, tell us in the comments. At the end of your story, let us know if it's real or made up. Who knows? Your story might be featured in one of our future videos. If you want more eerie mysteries to unravel, check out the rest of our channel. Until next time, stay curious.